You ever have one of those days where you're like, what the heck is going on? For example, this round I played at one of my favorite courses recently. So first hole, smooth cold top into the not good stuff. Stroke and distance, double bogey. Second hole, smooth cold top. Not great. Things did not really improve that much more, and so by the end of the 8th hole, made another double. Now I'm 8 over par. Based on my course handicap, I should be not 8 over par, and I am not enjoying getting absolutely schmammered by this course. So up here, it's going, what the heck is going on? Now at this point, most of us tell ourselves a lie, which is, I guess today just isn't my day. That's what I used to tell myself as well. I thought I just left my game at home. But the truth is that I had not left my game at home, I just hadn't switched it on. So between the 8th and 9th holes, I realized that I hadn't flipped my 4 switches because I was too focused on how cold it was really cold, on how bad the start was, on what was gonna happen the rest of the day. I was predicting all this stuff, but that's an easy fix. So I took 1 minute and I flipped these 4 switches. And it worked. Obviously, that's why we're here. So I ended up playing the next 10 holes in 2 under, as you can see here, including almost holing out on the very difficult par 3 17th. And I just noticed I hit 10 greens in a row. Turns out your mind is really powerful, and these 4 switches will help you turn it on. So if you want to start harnessing the power of your mind to play your best golf much more often, you're gonna love this video. Hey, what's up? I'm Manu, and I like golf, whiteboards, and alliteration. So spectacular. So, as I mentioned earlier, before you play your next round of golf, you should flip 4 switches in your mind right here. It's very important to note that 3 of them you flip on, and the 4th one you actually flip off. And if you stick around till the end, I'll actually talk about the mega switch, that I call it, which will help you do all of these much more consistently and reliably in kind of one big step, and actually keep doing it as you go through the round. So stick around for that for sure. So let's start with the first switch, which is to switch on your smart golf mind. And what this really means is putting your brain into smart golf mode. And this includes a bunch of things that I've listed here. Things like, basically all of it is course management, but I just listed it because it's a mode you can think about. But things like wind, elevation, what kind of target to aim for, no short siding. This is a really good one. If you haven't seen my videos on this, this is a really good one. Other things like what kind of shot dispersion you have. If you're really advanced, you might be thinking about spin or shot shape in terms of like, maybe you're hitting a wedge and you're thinking about, do I want to pull it back or do I want it to land and stay put because I'm really going to be hitting hard on it? All these different things that come into play. Now, we all know that feeling when you're kind of one with the course and you're thinking about all these other things. What we don't think about is we can actually flip the switch and turn that on. And so the next question, which I'm sure many of you are thinking about, is like, what do you mean by flipping the switch? And it's actually fairly straightforward, but it does feel unachievable at times. So let me give you a little more details. Flipping the switch is about telling your brain, yo, it's time for you to focus on achieving this goal that I want. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking, yeah, Manu, if I could do that all the time, I would be watching this video from my yacht. First, if you're watching this from your yacht, I'm available to come hang out with you. Hit me up. But the reality is we actually do this all the time already. We tell our minds what to focus on, and it happens. Like, have you ever bought a new car and then suddenly you notice every other Toyota Corolla or Lamborghini on the road? Your mileage may vary. That was a good one. But seriously, what it comes down to is there's a thing in our brains called the reticular activating system, and whatever you decide to focus on, it starts focusing on that thing. Like, let's do a quick experiment right now. So take a look around the room you're in, and in 3 seconds, I want you to notice everything you see that's blue. 3, 2, 1. What's interesting is, in that time that you look for everything that's blue, you probably also ignored everything that was red or green or black because your mind was so focused on blue. So whatever you focus on, your mind will find. With a caveat, if you're super focused on survival, your mind basically isn't going to listen to those instructions. So if you're super stressed, the instructions kind of fall apart. But try not to be super stressed, and then all of this stuff works really well. So back to the first switch. All of this is really just making a deliberate effort to remind the brain, hey, it's time to switch to intelligent golf mode because I'm on the course, and so I'm going to use my course management and all the skills I have in this space to make intelligent decisions, instead of, rushing into shots and then being sad that I didn't think through them as normal. It's actually useful to think about the pain because it reminds your brain of the value of doing this. So little extra tip there for you. And the reason that this is the first switch is because A, we often blame our swing for things that were actually just a bad decision anyway. But also, turning on your mind is super easy. This is something you can do even in the car on your way to your course, or as you're getting the range balls and about to walk out to the range to hit some warm-up shots or whatever. It's very easy to do, and this will actually have probably the biggest impact on your round. And that brings us to switch number 2, which is turning on your ideal swing mechanics. And so your ideal swing mechanics are effectively, what does a really good swing feel like? right? The feel is a really important part. And that includes things like what are the swing keys that you want to hit today, or what's the tempo that you want to have, and what's the tempo that you want to have. Now for the tempo, you can even visualize something. So you could use a YouTube video. My favorite, I'll link it down in the description, is actually a video of Tiger at his first ever tournament. It's just a video of him on the practice range, but to me that is perfect tempo. It's absolutely beautiful tempo. So I can visualize this, I can put this in my brain, but effectively what I'm doing is I'm teaching my brain what kind of shots I want to be hitting. And now when it comes to swing keys, the way I think about swing keys are what's important to me. This is not the swing thoughts you're supposed to have on the course. These are swing keys. So like, what are the core things you want to do? The reason they're not your swing, I mean, I would pick one of them to be your swing thought if you'd really like, but the reason they're not all your swing thoughts is that's too many thoughts. So for me, I have like 3 or 4 swing keys. You know, for me, they're usually I want to stand tall and strong. I want to feel very structured when I'm swinging the club, and I might have something else like a good square takeaway, you know, feeling just strong the whole time. So those are my regular swing keys. Sometimes I have 1 or 2 more or 1 or 2 less. It doesn't really matter that much. But what matters is I want to get a good feel for what a good swing feels like, at least just from a structure perspective. So let me grab a club here. And so the way to do this is actually just really slow-mo. You want to feel all the pieces. So I just talked about being tall, strong. For me, I call it structured, but that means like I can feel where the club is all the time. I'm not just loosey-goosey. That's what works for me. Your mileage may vary, but those are the things. So I'm basically just, I want to feel stable, and this is what a good swing feels like. When I think about the Tiger tempo, I'm trying not to break anything in this room. So when I think about Tiger tempo, you know, he's kind of up here, and then he's got his like nice tempo. So I want to visualize that and feel that in my mind. And it's really simple. It shouldn't take you too long, maybe like 15, 20 seconds at the very most. It's not too long. The reason that this is really important is you're telling your brain what a good swing feels like. Now the thing is, if you don't tell your brain these things, it defaults to its OG wiring, which is more effort equals better outcomes, right? That's generally how the brain works, which is why all of us try to swing the club too hard for some period of our golf lifetimes. Maybe you're still doing it. I definitely fall into that sometimes. But that's the brain's OG wiring. It's generally OG being like OG, right? So, so basically what it comes down to is the brain is always gonna think, swing harder, get better result. Not necessarily true. When you remind it that this is what you want, now it gets into a better state and understands, oh wait, timing can be a thing. This is what good tempo feels like. This is what good outcomes feel like. So you're reprogramming your brain into what you actually want to do. And the real point of all of this is you really want to get this feel into your body. That's why the slow-mo is so important, because when you start swinging at full speed, your goals kind of change. Generally, the brain's goal all the time is to keep you standing. And so when you're swinging at full speed, the brain's gonna focus more on just keeping you balanced versus, you know, all the slow-mo kind of swing keys, etc., that you might be trying to hit. So key point, get that feel into your body. Shouldn't take you too long. Do things slow-mo and really kind of focus on your swing keys and your tempo. 15 seconds max, switch number 2 is flipped. By the way, if you're finding this video useful, could you please help me out by smashing or just touching the like button and or leaving me a comment. Comments are super helpful to help with the engagement, the algorithm, and all that. I'm also open to any feedback. Happy to change stuff as we go forward. I want to make sure the stuff that's helpful for you. The other thing is, recently I had a couple of spots open up my coaching practice. So if you're interested, there's an intro call link below. Please book one. At the very least, we'll get to know each other. Maybe we like each other a lot. Maybe we'll change each other's lives. Who knows? So anyway, options. Okay. Enough sales pitch, let's move on to switch number 3. So now that we've turned on the ideal swing mechanics, it's time to make that happen by turning on the big golf muscles. And the thing is that often we don't do this, and then that leads to either, especially when you're swinging hard, either bad swings or you end up getting hurt, or both, which is the absolute worst. So a bunch of the big muscles, you know, the legs, the core, basically large muscles are going to do the work that you really want. It's very hard. You know, we tend to default to using little muscles to do the work, like with your hands, your wrists, your forearms, which are not giant. The big muscles are really from your knees up to your chest, right? So got to turn those on. And there's one other muscle that we don't always associate with golf, very, very important, which is the brain. The brain is very, very, very important because if you don't get enough electricity going through your brain, it's gonna be really hard to make the decisions from switch 1 that we just turned on. So this one you can turn on by drinking some water. Water will help all of these, but especially for the brain, because the brain is 70% water. That's really important. Now, overall of the 4 switches, this is the most time-consuming step. Ideally, if I have a ton of time, I like to take minutes to warm up all these muscles. You know, I do things like, you know, you'll probably see me, I'm not gonna do them now, but jumping jacks, I do some lunges, I do a few other things, etc. If you're interested, you can also use something like a Theragun, or maybe like, you know, you can get a resistance band or something just to get muscles moving. But at the end of the day, it doesn't have to take that long, especially if you're stressed for time. You can also do this while you're walking. So for me, with the story I told at the beginning of this video, my muscles were already partially warmed up because I carry my bag when I play. And one of the big reasons that I do that is because by carrying this heavy weight, and I usually load it up with a lot of water, but by carrying this big weight, it helps me get these muscles going. And so my large muscles start kicking in. The thing is, at the end of the day, the brain is gonna do whatever you tell it to do, but it may not do it in the most efficient way. So when you don't turn on these muscles, what the brain ends up doing, it ends up compensating with little muscles, like the little muscles around your back, which are meant to protect your back, but they're also not meant to carry like large loads or make big swings. And that's where you end up with back pain and other issues like that. So we don't want to do that. The other value of doing this, let's really go back to what we care about, which is good scores and playing well. So the thing that is really valuable about turning on the big golf muscles is it actually helps us execute on these ideal swing mechanics. And that's really, really important. So if you want to play well, you have to turn on the big muscles. And this is something you also see with the pros. The pros, you know, tend to stretch and warm up all for a really long time before they play. As normal people who have jobs and lives, and you know, sometimes you're rushing to the golf course, you may not have that luxury. But that doesn't mean you can't spend like 30 seconds just kind of warming something up. So do a few jumping jacks, do some lunges, do a little bit of, you know, isometric stretching. There's all these different things you can Google to just get something quick to get things moving. And the other, my hack is I carry my bag, which helps me warm everything up as I'm going. It's also helpful in the winter when it's really cold. And that brings us to the fourth switch, which if you're only gonna switch one of these switches, I don't know why, just do them, it takes like 2 seconds. But if you're only gonna switch one, this is the one. This is the important one. And this one, as I mentioned, is something you turn off. What you turn off is your predicting mind, or the big word is catastrophization. Let me tell you a little bit more about this. So the brain in general likes certainty. And it's very important for the brain to feel safe. It's its job is to make us survive, right? It's not to make us happy, it's to make us survive. And so it's always better for the brain to think about not losing versus winning. Because if you think a stick is a rattlesnake, you're not gonna pick up a stick. But if you think a rattlesnake is a stick, it's the last time you ever pick up a stick. All right, so the brain is always gonna look for the worst case scenario, which is what it does when you're on the golf course. So the way it does that is by predicting the future. So think about this. How many times have you started a round and a couple of shots don't go the way you plan? Maybe you cold top your drive into the stuff on the first hole and you got to take a 2-shot penalty. And immediately your mind goes to, oh man, now I'm going to shoot 2 over whatever score I was going to have, right? That's a 74, or that's an 82, or whatever I was going to do, right? The brain starts predicting the future pretty much immediately. When it does that, that makes us sad and worried. Because we had a goal, we were hoping what to do. The brain's trying to make us feel safe by predicting what's going to happen so we can pre-disappoint ourselves so we're okay. But really what it ends up doing is make us sad because we're not getting what we want. When you start being sad and worried, this causes actual biochemical problems and changes in your body. So your body releases adrenaline because you're scared, fight or flight kicks in. Your body releases cortisol if you're continuing to like stew on something, especially like how badly things are going. And these are problems for us. So biochemically what happens is once the adrenaline and cortisol are released into the bloodstream, they stick around for some period of time. They have what's called a half-life, so they take some time to metabolize and be gone. And while they're in the bloodstream, they basically help us survive, but that means they turn some things off and other things on. So adrenaline, for example, it takes like, depending on how much you have, all this other stuff, all the caveats apply, but you know, it'll take like, let's say 6 minutes for this adrenaline to metabolize from your bloodstream. Now, while it's taking those 6 minutes, what adrenaline does, because your brain thinks it's in fight or flight, so it's running away, it pushes all of the blood to your big muscles, taking it away from your brain and taking it from your fine motor control. Guess what you need on the golf course? Your brain and your fine motor control. So while your brain is in adrenaline mode, there's a lot of adrenaline being dumped, it's gonna be really hard to hit like nice shots. It's gonna be really hard to think really clearly. So that's a problem. And once you start doing this for a long period of time, cortisol starts getting released once you start stressing for a long period of time. And the cortisol is there to help you survive, but it also does similar things in terms of like preventing you from thinking clearly and causing other changes in your thinking, the way you're playing, etc. Now, the thing about cortisol is the half-life of cortisol is a lot longer than adrenaline. Adrenaline's half-life is about 2 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes. Cortisol's half-life is like 66 minutes. It takes 3 for them to go away. So 6 minutes for adrenaline, 3 hours for cortisol. Not great. So put simply, the mind, in an effort to make us feel certain, and safe, survive, it starts predicting the future. And predicting the future in like the worst case scenario way, which makes us sad and worried, releases all these hormones that basically make it really hard for us to play good golf. Now, the brain doesn't understand the difference between actual danger and just like not scoring well on the golf course, it's a different kind of danger, right? So it gets caught up in this. So all you have to do is just change this piece here, which is tell yourself a better story. And the way to do that, there's two pieces to it. The first piece is to recognize that you cannot accurately predict the future. Like, you never know what's gonna happen. For example, look at this hole I played 3 days ago. So after hitting a not good shot, I think I hit the ground like a foot behind the ball on my tee shot. I then hit like a really good 3-wood over a bunch of trees and landed it near the green, and then chipped in for birdie. Now, if you had asked me what the most likely outcome was after I massively duffed this 3-iron, it would not have been chipping in for birdie. But if I'd gone ahead thinking about how bad that was, how my score was gonna be bad, et cetera, at this point I think I was like even par or something close to it, like it would have sucked, and I probably would have been sad and worried and not been in a good state. I would have let some cortisol adrenaline into my bloodstream, things wouldn't have gone as well, and I wouldn't have been in a good place to think clearly, aim properly, end up making birdie. It was also not a fluky birdie, it was actually like, I did a good job of hitting those shots. And the only reason that happened is because I told myself a different story. So that's part one, which is recognize that you cannot accurately predict the future. Every story you tell about the future, whether it is a fearful one or a faithful one, a happy one, they're all made up. And so one of them is more likely to cause problems, and the other one is less likely to cause problems. So might as well just focus on the less likely one. The second thing you have to remind yourself of that will help you stop predicting the future is that the optimal strategy in every single situation, on the 100% of situations on the golf course, the optimal strategy is always to focus 100% on the next shot. There is never a situation where it makes more sense to focus on the long term than it does on the short term, because you'll end up messing up the shot. And so if you think about that, where you have two options, and so predicting the future is something that's like not proven, so you might as well avoid the way that creates biochemical disadvantages for you in the future. And the best thing you can do is just literally focus 100% on the next shot. That helps calm the mind down a little bit and helps it turn off that prediction. Sometimes it's predicting things that don't have to do with golf, and the best way to do that is to defer those things. So the mind doesn't like open-ended things, it likes closure. And so a simple way to give it closure is to say, hey, look, let's talk about this at whatever, I'm finishing the round at 4 o'clock. I'll think about this from 4:30 to 5 when I'm driving home. Cool. It might pop up once or twice again, but you say at 4:30 or 5, it feels like it gets closure, and then you can think about it at that point. So hopefully it won't bother the rest of that round. The final thing to note on this one is that this is a switch you may have to turn off over and over again because it'll pop up again, right? And I think it's important to be kind to the mind, to yourself, because it's just trying to help you. The mind's job is to keep us alive, and predicting the future is what's done that for hundreds of thousands or millions of years. So it's gonna keep doing that. But that's okay. On the golf course, if you turn it off and it turns itself back on, you go, hey, look, if I predict the future, it will likely lead to a not useful outcome. And the best thing I can do is focus 100% on the next shot. Let's just do that. And you do it 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 times. And as you do it more and more, your mind starts getting better at it. And the final thing to note on this one is on days when you've had low physical recovery or your mind is super busy, you're tired, it might be harder. Emotional regulation is harder when you're really just physically tired. So give yourself a break. Be kind to yourself. Every part of you, this part of you, which is potentially messing up your golf game, is actually still trying to help you. And so I think that's really important. We tend to get angry at our fear or at, or predicting the future, the predicting all these different parts of ourselves. That's like the definition of internal conflict. So let's not do that. Instead, let's just be kind and grateful to the mind for like keeping us alive for eons, and just be like, oh, this is a different situation. Let's take a different angle. So we don't need this right now. Let's just fill ourselves with like dopamine, oxytocin, some other good stuff instead. Yeah, I haven't yet figured out how to just like say dopamine, oxytocin, make it happen, but I'm sure there's a way. Now, as promised, time for the mega switch, which allows you to do all of these pretty much automatically. And the way to do that is to create an identity for yourself that you bring forward on the golf course that effectively has these switches as part of that identity. Let me tell you more about what that really means. So inside all of us, we have a bunch of different personas. Here are some of mine. So for example, inside me is Manu the son, Manu the husband. Surprisingly, I know it's surprising to everybody, Manu the scaredy cat. I get scared about some things sometimes. There's Manu the desk jobber. There's also, among other things, there's also Manu the championship golfer. And I believe, this is just a straight up belief because, hey, that's what I choose to believe. But you also have this. We all have this inside us. What's interesting is when I show up to play golf, I don't need all these other personalities involved when I'm playing, all these other identities. All I need to do is call out this one championship golfer. I'm gonna do a much better job of playing a good round if Manu the Scaredy Cat is less involved and Manu the championship golfer is more involved in playing that round. Now the cool thing is, for the championship golfer, these things come automatically. Now I can remind myself beforehand, and in the early days I did remind myself, you know, as part of the championship golfer, I think smart. I think of good swing mechanics and I feel the good swing mechanics. I warm everything up because that's the right way to do it, and I make sure that I'm not predicting things that aren't actually gonna be true. So all of those are part of it, but once you make this part of your identity, everything changes. When the championship golfer for me shows up and plays around, I play significantly better. And so one really simple thing I've done is I've integrated it into my pre-shot routine. Now, obviously I didn't do it that day, I'd forgotten because I was too worried about it being cold. But before I hit a shot, I just stop and go championship golfer. And you may have noticed my chest shifted. And it's because the way the championship golfer stands is not down here, it's up here. And that creates a whole bunch of downstream effects, you know, positive benefits, etc. I end up playing better and so on. And so it's a core part of my pre-shot routine. You can also make it part of your pre-shot routine. And so simple thing you can do right now is stop and think for a second and go, what does my championship golfer persona feel like? If you can, I suggest you stand and just stand the way you would stand if you were the championship golfer for this moment, right? You can kind of get a feel for what that feels like inside. Now in this state, have a think about how you feel about hitting shots. Are you as worried about yesterday's shot, or maybe is that no longer a consideration because you're going to bring the best part of your game out? So the simple way to bring out your A game is to create an identity for yourself, which you bring out every time you need to hit a shot. Make it part of your pre-shot routine, make it part of your pre-round routine, whatever works for you. Because the only reason that sometimes we hit good shots and sometimes less good shots is because with the good shots, we bring out the best part of ourselves that is confident and strong and focused in making good decisions. Yeah, I know you're going to say a lot of them are flukes, but that's not true. So you do bring out the best part of yourself to do it. And that is encapsulated in an identity. So for me, that identity is championship golfer. I also have another identity that I like to use called the professor. Those are for me. Find one that works for you, and it will be automatic to hit these 4 switches: the smart golf mind, the ideal swing mechanics, waking up your big golf muscles as well, and then turning off that predicting mind, which will get you there. And anytime you're having a little bit of trouble pulling this identity out, it's really simple. All you have to do is walk like this persona, and it will come right back. And speaking of walking, probably the most valuable video I've ever made is this one right here. It is literally the first lesson they teach my elite college golfers, and it will change your life. You're welcome in advance. So check it out, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.